Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright. The people that run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version.
You to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. In Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. The next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati. Hi, I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress in OH-10, which is all of Montgomery County, all of Greene County, and parts of Clark County. Which parts? Well, the parts the Republicans liked. We're here to talk about what this is sort of a story of what actually got me involved in politics. So I bought a house for $14,000 in Dayton, and I thought I'd fix it up, and then other people would fix their houses up, and this would be a great neighborhood. Didn't quite work that way, and one of the first things I learned is unmarked historic districts come with a complete trap of if you start fixing things up and you don't do things their way, they take you to court. Well, I thought there was a problem with this. I thought there might be a thing called a restrictive covenant you could put in all the deeds of these real pieces of property to warn buyers of these special zoning requirements, which aren't known to everybody. Oh, that was 36 years ago. I don't know at this point. And the city still hasn't done it. But what really bothered me is I actually went to City Hall expecting somebody to listen and help me out. And that didn't happen. that really was, I thought, no big deal. And it was like I was talking to a brick wall. At that time, we had a city manager named Rick Hellwig, and he actually came out and talked to me and reassured me. I felt pretty good about things. But it wasn't all fun and games. And it took a long time in order to get this neighborhood moving in the right direction, which is where it is now, but now we have other problems. And I'm going to give an example of this is going to sound to some people like sniveling, but parking is at a premium down here. A lot of people don't have garages. A lot of people can't get their cars in the garages because garages are too small. So what happens? We have a lot of cars parked on the street. And lately we're getting our water mains replaced. So the guys doing this have dug up the street and multiple times to put out everything in, and they do a relatively good job, but you know what? They just don't really clean up after themselves. So after they got done cutting all this concrete and digging all this stuff and putting down all this crumbled limestone, we've got dust everywhere. And if you know anything about respiratory system failures, dust can be bad, especially concrete dust. But no, so I asked them, would it be possible for them to bring a street sweeper with water down and come through and clean the street? Oh no, we don't do that. These guys are contractors. We're the city. We don't work together. I'm like, we'll clean up. So they brought a big thing with a rotating brush and just brushed everything into this bin and kicked a lot of dust up in the street and thought that qualified. Well, then they came out again with a concrete saw and were sawing away again. And there were just plumes, clouds of dust. And every time a car goes down, there's dust. This wouldn't happen in Oakwood. This wouldn't happen in other communities. This is something that can be avoided. You can easily come down and hose everything down at the end of the workday. You can suppress the dust. You can also take down your signs when you're not going to be there so people can park in front of their homes. Like my neighbor who has lupus, who doesn't like to have to walk around the corner. But hey, no, we can't do things like that. And me asking about it was problematic. That's because we have lower expectations. We have lower standards. And I've seen this when I was in the military between the high-speed, squared-away units where they don't have to ask you twice to show up on time. They don't have to ask you twice to do anything because they expect you to be a professional. And then you get to regular Army units, and it's like you're babysitting. So a lot of you know that I've run for office quite a few times, and I've run into the Democratic Party for ages, as a major roadblock. Apparently, I don't fit in with them. Other people don't either, but they lie to them. Like when they told Darrell Fairchild, after he printed signs, was ready to run for state commissioner, oh no, you have to wait your turn. We're going to run Jeff Mims. And then his turn came, and they ran Chris Shaw. And then Darrell had to wait until their boy Joey Williams got caught doing crimes, and then he could win in a special election where they went after him hard too. Why is Darrell so bad? He's a Democrat. He's not their kind of Democrat. He's not an insider. He's not one of the ones that's involved in pay to play. Now, the way this all works is we draw up precincts, and usually drawing up precincts isn't that important for local precincts, but it is when you're trying to get the maximum number of city employees in winning districts so you can have the people you want running the party. Because these people, who only need 5 signatures to get on the ballot, most of them run unopposed, they work for the people in power. And so they control them. And this is what happened last night. The people that control the party. There were 52 people at the meeting, and 25 of them decided they didn't want to endorse me, but they'll endorse everybody else. And they gave some reasons. And then Mark Owens got up and he lied and suggested that I said something about Paul Bradley that I never would have said, never did say. In fact, I've endorsed Paul Bradley every time he's run. I think he's a smart guy. I don't think he's quite the troll that some of these other people are. But that's all right, because Mark Owens is already known as a dysfunctional leader, and he got told he had to step down after he sent out a smear mailing against Daryl Fairchild and Shanice Turner-Sloss. But they didn't want to endorse me. And I said to them at the end of my speech, and by the way, I posted that video up earlier today. They said that apparently, I'm a Trump-like candidate or something like that. I'm a Trump-like candidate. But I said at the end of my speech, this means you're endorsing Mike Turner. Oh, no, we're not doing that. Oh, yes, you are, because I'm being denied being on the slate cards. I'm denied having access to data. I'm not being reached out to by any of the major PACs or anything else. And the reality is they've run 10 people against Mike Turner, and every one of them has lost. So much for their choices. Now, they said, I wasn't endorsed in the primary. Well, you shouldn't endorse in the primary. In fact, Clark and Greene County don't endorse ever. But Montgomery County does, and the state party seems to think this is important. And the question is what does an endorsement mean when the primary voters, all the Democrats in those 3 counties, had a choice of 4 different candidates, and they chose me? Why do you think they chose me? Because I'm not afraid of Mike Turner. I'm also not afraid of the party. And I will call them out on BS. So one of the things Mark Owens said, well, he called Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad. Well, I don't recall the context exactly on that, and I don't look at that as a bad thing, but Muhammad, when he was elected to school board, started running school business before he was even sworn in. That was illegal. He had a secret bus trip where he was going and taking people through to see which schools they'd close. I filmed it all. The link is down below. Muhammad Al-Hamdani breaks the law. And he's very smug about it. And he's very contrite. And he says, I'm not a member of the party. Well, I'm sorry. I paid my dues. I lost my precinct captain election by 7 votes to Karen Wick Gagne, who up until this primary wasn't even a registered Democrat. I love Karen dearly. I've known her forever. But I went door to door knocking, and I handed out an awful lot of literature. And I still sort of question that election, but it's not a big deal. Because being a precinct captain doesn't mean anything in Montgomery County other than you can vote with the people in charge. And the way they vote is undemocratic. Could you imagine if we had congressional votes where nobody ever actually recorded who voted which way? Could you imagine that on the Dayton City Commissioner, Dayton Public Schools, that you couldn't tell who voted for what and why? Well, that's how the party works. They do it by raising hands or talking or standing and sitting, and they don't have any way of verifying who is actually a precinct captain when everybody stands and sits, because they don't use ballots. And there are systems that we could do on people's phones, and they could just vote and record it, and nobody would see who's standing or sitting, and they could have totals, and they could print them out later. But no. Somebody asked, why didn't you get the minutes from the meeting 2 months ago until last night? Well, again, incompetent. Then they had this young guy, who's a Riverside councilman, get up and say, oh, the website was horrible, it's in WordPress. That's old school. That, I'm a millennial, or I'm the Gen Z or whatever, and we need something more modern. He went and switched to a proprietary system because he doesn't understand WordPress, which is running 40% of the world's websites, and for very good reason. But this is the genius they have doing this, because they don't have anybody there that knows how to win an election. And in fact, Mohammed told me, well, we don't have lists of donors or voters or email data. Well, that's what your job is. Your job is to have all these things ready so you can run people and support them. They shouldn't have to go and, send out printed pieces of mail where they've illegally harvested the addresses from campaign finance reports, because that is actually illegal to take that data and reuse it. Everybody does it, but it's illegal. And that's one of the reasons I believe in a donor registration system that would clarify a lot of this stuff. But anyway, So Muhammad tells me, oh, we don't have that. We don't have money. We don't even have a computer that's up to date. He complains about that several times. They even lost access to their Facebook page. Does this sound like a competent organization? And I got to tell you, people who come there for the first time expecting to be in a democratic organization that's working on, moving this country forward, all they end up hearing is bickering amongst people about who to endorse, who they don't like, who they do like, and telling you what to do. There's never any educational component. There's never any training. There's never any informational sessions. There's no greeter even there to say hello and welcome and, get your name and your email and put it on the list and thank you for coming. All the things a competent organization would do. A competent organization. Now, I've run organizations, neighborhood groups. I've run my veterans business group. There are ways to make meetings interesting and valuable. It's not just about running down the things you had to do. It's about giving people a reason to come out. Let's watch a short documentary. Let's discuss it. I've tried recommending this many times to the Montgomery County Democratic Party. Nothing. And the crazy thing is, now that we've had, been through the pandemic, it's pretty easy to go ahead and ask somebody to go on Zoom and talk to you and interact with the meeting. So we could have played, for instance, like Street Fight, the film documentary about Cory Booker and how he ran the first time, and then had a discussion about it. Or we could have had all kinds of people come in and talk about data gathering and how people work and the psychographics of voting and what's important. But now, instead, we spend more of our time tearing down our own members. Now, remember, this is interactive. So if you've got any questions or if you want to say hi, please do comment definitely on Facebook, on YouTube. I can see it. I'm not sure I can see comments. Yeah, I can't see comments on Facebook today. So if there are any comments there, say hi. And I do want to say to one of our regular viewers, Tam Stefanik, sorry, we're missing you. She lives in Cape Coral, Florida. I've known her since I was probably 17 years old. Her dad was my barber. Anyways, her boat has sunk. Her house has 6 or 8 inches of water throughout. They have no power. They have no water. And her dad's house is missing 20% of its roof. And they're sitting there in squalor right now. And I've offered for her to come up here and wait it out for a bit until they get things semi-restored. And it's not going to happen. But the devastation of Ian through Florida was pretty brutal. So that's one of those things that government, we talk about all the time. We don't want government regulation. We don't want government interference. The moment everything goes bad, you count on the government. And socialism all of a sudden seems okay. But the reality is disaster relief, providing homes for, and shelter and medical aid and all those things, that's what government is here for. That's why we have fire departments. That's why we have police departments. And hopefully we have water departments that can restore the water and make everything work. So, heart's going out to you, Tam, and I hope things get better. I was the first call that got through to her. Her phone hadn't been working for a while, so at least they've got some cell service reestablished, but she wasn't even able to text out. So back to expectations and how organizations are supposed to work. As many of you know, I also used to film at Dayton Public Schools, and I would make films at my own expense explaining solutions to some of their problems. And I've got a link down to an article about why I said there was no hope for Dayton Public Schools from about 4 years ago, where we actually watched a presentation by a Dayton Public Schools managerial level person who got up in front of that school board and started running a slide deck. The first slide said, "Your perfect title slide." I'm not sure if the first one or definitely the second one had lorem ipsum text. And by the fourth one, it was obvious that this person was totally unprepared and had no idea of what they were talking about or what they were presenting. And nobody on that school board stopped them. And that included Muhammad and Jocelyn Reinhardt. And I was just like, they're asking questions. This was about a $400,000 contract with the University of Virginia for some HR type consulting. And it was something that Dr. Lawley wanted, and they gave it to her, even with that presentation. Now, had I been on the board and we had been, the first time I saw a slide like that, I'd say, excuse me, please, it's pretty clear that your slides aren't ready for a presentation. If you want to make this presentation without the slides, that would be fine. But if you need some more time to come back, do that, because that wasn't going to cut it. So they did award the contract. 2 years later, they backed out of it and forfeited a bunch of money and a bunch of effort and didn't get any payback. Now, things are about to change at Dayton Public Schools, and they may have already started to change. And it comes down to somebody there doesn't allow people to get away with BS. Somebody there sets a standard of a higher expectations. That somebody is their new business manager, David Lawrence, who is up first thing in the morning out at the buses on Monday and riding them and talking to the bus drivers and the managers to try to figure out how things are working or not working and what the problems are. He does this thing called management by wandering around, actually getting out there, talking, asking questions, seeing the situations on the ground. And he's going into buildings. And all of a sudden, guess what? Libby Lawley has left the Crystal Palace and come down on her broomstick and has actually visited some schools. And the people in HR are now responding to things. And things are starting to, change just because somebody comes in with better, higher expectations. And that's really what you have to ask for. Just because you've been fed shit for years and told it's steak, once you realize it's not steak, that you didn't really know what steak was, you have to raise your, say no more bullshit, let's get to the steak. And the reality is that's what's been going on with this country for so long. We've gotten so used to corrupt politicians. We've got so used to corrupt political parties. We've got used to such bad leadership that doesn't care about delivering anything other than the bare minimum, that we've forgotten how to be great. And that's not good enough for me. It's never been good enough for me. I try to do things at the next level. That's part of the reason I'm doing these daily live stream town halls. I'm trying something new. People say, oh, you're not getting enough viewers. It grows. It takes time. And it gives you guys a chance to interact with your congressman every single day. Now, I hope every one of you tells people this is something different. This is something new. This is something that could be a game changer. And we move forward. Because the days of congressmen like Mike Turner, who never come and talk to anybody, have to be over. And we'll have some more stuff coming up about that soon. I'm going to give you something fun next week. But a couple other housekeeping issues. So last week, the thing I couldn't remember that I uploaded was a 2-hour meeting that was given by the League of Women Voters about redistricting and gerrymandering and explaining what it means to you. And very, very scary idea of pushing down the whole thing to the states and getting the federal government out of it, which would be a disaster. As it is right now, in Ohio, you can have 5 different vendors for the technology to track voters, their voting record, and everything else. How this makes sense, I don't know, and why it's not provided by the federal government and tested on a lot of more platforms everywhere across the country, why we don't have a universal way of creating ballots. Every other country does this. Canada does it. If we had had a standard ballot format, Al Gore wouldn't have lost to George W. Bush in 2000. Bad design caused 5,000 people in Broward County to vote for Pat Buchanan, who thought they were voting for Al Gore. I'm not good at statistics, but I can tell you that they proved that there is no way that Pat Buchanan was that fabulously loved by a whole bunch of previous Democrats, other than the ballot design was bad. So, it is Friday. going to have the weekend. If any of you want to go out and canvas, we've got the tools, we've got the materials. I got t-shirts and hats for you, and I'll be happy to share them. Go to the website, go to electesrati.com/act, sign up for volunteer, send us a message through the website. Send me a message at david@electesrati.com. Call me on the campaign number 937-985-1312, and I will meet you and hook you up with stuff, and we will be off and running, knocking on doors, talking to people, and hopefully making a difference. There are lots of things that need to get better, and I think the number one thing people are frustrated about with government, it's not inflation, it's not abortion, it's not gun control, it's that they're not listened to. It's that they don't think what they do matters. They think that the whole thing is run by a bunch of billionaires, which it is, and we're just sort of screwed. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to be screwed. You need to get all your friends, you need to talk to people and say, enough's enough. We're going to throw a giant wrench in the system, and we're going to elect somebody that has higher expectations, isn't owned by anybody, and isn't afraid of anything. I've had my window shot out. I've had my leg slammed in the car, with my car door slammed on my leg by a union leader by the name of Tom Ritchie. It threatened to kick my ass if I got out of the car. I've been through this. I don't have a wife. I don't have kids. You touch my dog, I will kill you. But other than that, let's go. It's time for this country to take our government back. And that means, number one, get rid of the pogues in office who are bought, sold, and paid for by the billionaires. And number two, get people who actually will listen to you and respond to you. That's me. I'm David Esrati. I approve this message, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright. The people that run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version of me that doesn't find old people loathsome or pointless. Has a conventionally attractive yet curiously still family. Listening to my constituents, legislating, these are things I don't do. What I do is spend about 70% of my time raising funds for re-election. I'd do anything to stay in office. My name's Gil Fulbright, but hell, I'll change my name to Phil Goldbright, or Bill Fulbright, or fill up my mouth with farts. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the fine people that finance my campaign. Now, in order to do these things, I have to stay in office. And to stay in office, I have to keep these guys happy. Now, if any of these things make these guys unhappy, well, my hands are tied. So come November, the choice is clear. Do you want another spineless mouthpiece for special interest in lobbyists? Or a spineless mouthpiece for special interest in lobbyists? I'm Philip, a mouth with farts, and I approve